Hi, this is Janet Swanson, and you are listening to One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. Today, I just want to encourage you, inspire you, and give you a reason to keep going. As you're listening to this podcast, I pray that the Holy Spirit will open up your ears to hear Him, open up your eyes to see Him, and open up your heart to know Him. I pray that 2021 will find you flowing in the year of God's favor over your life. I pray that healing will come to your heart speedily, and I pray that this podcast will be a blessing to you. Welcome to One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One Voice Makes a Difference podcast. I am so glad that you joined us today. I have a very, very special guest. Her name is Dee Boyd, and you guys, her story is so powerful. The first time I heard her story and we were on the phone and we were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe what my ears are hearing. This lady has been through so much. So, first of all, I just want to tell you a little bit about her. She says that early in her 25 years of fitness career, she appeared healthy on the outside, but struggled on the inside. And how many of you can relate to that? You're healthy on the outside, but struggling on the inside. She said the effects of sexual trauma and her 2 abortions led to her Christian therapy in 1999. Through the recommendation of her therapist, she also began a post-abortion Bible study the same year. That's pretty incredible. And there she had to face her past, and she began the healing process. As she released her inner weight, Dee was motivated to improve her eating habits, and this led to accomplishing several fitness goals, including running a full marathon in 2013, and she then launched Free and Fit in 2014, helping women become healthier from the inside out. That's pretty powerful, you guys. So Dee started sharing her story with teen girls and women at the beginning of her healing process, and now she continues to speak at various churches, women's retreat. Dee hosted her first Free and Fit retreat in 2015. Her retreats have evolved into a 4-day event focusing on emotional healing and fitness. In 2011, Dee hosted her first balloon release to honor children lost prematurely due to abortion, miscarriage, or sudden death. And ever since then, she has been given dignity to hundreds of precious children and helped bring peace to their mothers ever since then. So that's pretty powerful. Dee, thank you so much for being with us today. You have such a powerful testimony, bringing healing to women from the inside out. Thank you so much for being here today.
It is my pleasure.
Well, Dee, a lot of people that have been listening to this podcast, this podcast is all about making our voices known and our voices heard, and giving a platform for people just to share their stories. And many people that are listening out there, they have their stories too, but they're stuck. You know, they're stuck in this journey. Maybe they go to church and they know the Lord, but they're still hurting on the inside. And as you and I both know, we were in church and still hurting. And back in the day, the church really didn't bring a lot of recognition to sexual abuse.
Not at all.
So as I was reading your bio, we know that you've been traumatized by sexual abuse and rape, and that led to abortion and led to a lot of different things. But I just want you to greet everybody first, and then just tell us a little bit about your story, especially how did it all start? What was your first memory of your sexual abuse?
Oh my goodness. Thank you everyone for just taking the time to listen. My story actually begins in my childhood. The best way that I can describe it is when you trust someone that's in your life and that trust is broken. That is exactly what happened. And from that moment moving forward, like my life completely changed, like in my childhood.
How old were you?
This was preteen, so maybe between, say, 10 and 12.
Right in the middle of puberty.
I was just getting ready to say, that
Yeah.
is what I remember. So just as my body was developing, and I can tell you that my body developed a whole lot quicker than I did mentally,
Right.
you know? So
Yeah.
I had the body of a woman, but the mindset of a child.
Right.
And so just as I'm kind of entering into that phase, this happens. And it completely changed everything, you know?
Yeah.
The freedom that I had in my youth, like it was completely taken away. So one of my first memories is becoming body conscious, you know, just being aware that now I have to protect my body. So being mindful of the things that I wore and just trying to present myself a certain way, even though I can't even really tell you what way that was. Do you know what I mean?
Did you feel like you tried to cover it up, or you were embarrassed of it?
Exactly.
Like
That's
to cover
it
up? Yeah.
exactly. I was
Okay.
absolutely embarrassed. And it didn't help that I would have a lot of adult women compliment me on my body. You know,
Wow.
especially like my legs. And it's just, I didn't know where to put all of that, because I have this group of people telling me one thing, but yet I feel like in a way my body betrayed me, because that was the thing that I thought like brought this, you know, kind of brought this on. So it was a struggle, you know, it was a struggle for me.
You know, you guys, they say the statistics are 1 out of every 4 girls is sexually abused before the age of 12. And, you know, you think about that, and they say that 98% of those girls that are abused before the age of 12 is by someone they know, by someone that they trusted, either a family member, someone with authority like a teacher or a pastor or a neighbor, a babysitter, someone like that had authority, that was overseeing you, watching out for you, and they took advantage of their power or their authority over you. And that's where it happens. And then we don't know how, as children, to tell somebody. Did it ever cross your mind that, hey, this is wrong, I need to tell somebody about this? Or did they threaten you after they hurt you, or, you know, they traumatized you, obviously, and I was too. But, you know, in my heart, I kept thinking, I need to tell somebody this. But my abuser, he told me, if you tell anybody, I'm going to kill you. And I believed him, because he was a violent man. So how did you process all of that?
Honestly, I can tell you I didn't really process it until adulthood. But I knew enough to know that it wasn't right. And I did speak up. And I did have someone kind of come to my rescue, so to speak, and confront the person. That gave me a greater sense of security, even though I still struggled, if that makes sense. So it felt like, you know, someone was there in my corner, but the struggle was still there, you know.
So was it an ongoing thing? Was it just a one-time thing?
This was a one-time thing.
Okay.
It was a one-time thing. But because it was someone that I, like you said, that I trusted,
Yeah.
it just made the whole process that much worse. It
absolutely.
was just such a struggle.
Did you have to continue to see them over
Absolutely.
and over?
Absolutely. So it just made it
Awkward.
so difficult for me. Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So were there any more even after that? Because I know that even at that young age, there were seeds that were planted, and probably seeds of shame, seeds of guilt. What else do you think was planted in your heart at that moment?
I can tell you, in hindsight, I can say it's just God protecting me, because I don't remember.
Wow.
You know, I don't remember. It was almost like it happened, and then God just kind of shut it down for me. So I didn't have to relive it over and over again in my youth. You know, it wasn't until 9th grade when I experienced rape for the first time that those memories started to come back.
Wow.
Because I suppressed it. Like what happened it was completely suppressed.
Right.
I don't know how long that process took, but by the time I'd gone through, elementary, middle school, and then got to high school, like that stuff was completely suppressed. But in ninth grade, it all came back.
So what happened in ninth grade?
So it was someone that I trusted. Again.
Oh my gosh.
Someone that I trusted. He was like a brother to me. And there was this, I guess you can say, this kind of attraction maybe between the two of us. And he had invited me over to quote unquote meet his mother. That's the story that I was told. But that is not what happened. So he came to my house and we were supposedly headed to his mom's house. But instead, we ended up at an abandoned house. 2-story, like I can literally, as I'm talking to you, visualize it, because there are just certain things that you just still remember. So I remember what it looked like. So it was this 2-story building. We went up to the second floor, and I just remember it being dirty and dusty and kind of like brown and a dingy yellow. And we walk into the door, and there's dust everywhere. So obviously this place is abandoned, but there's furniture there. So like I remember this dusty brown couch, and he immediately takes me to the bedroom. However, there was another guy and girl in the bedroom.
What?
So we just come back out and we sit on the couch, and he starts kissing me, and then it's kind of like forceful kissing, and I'm just kind of like, trying to like.
Had he ever kissed you before?
No.
Wow. So this is all
all completely new.
Yeah.
This is all completely new. And so I'm just like, I'm just hold up, like, just I'm not ready. And he gets up, and I guess I remember another room. There was another room like to the right. So he gets up, he goes to this other room. He comes back out of this room and literally only wearing a condom.
Wow.
That was it.
Wow.
That was it. And I can tell you the rest is pretty much a blur.
Wow.
From that point.
Wow. That's awful. I can't even imagine that. And this happens to girls all the time.
Exactly.
And, it should be when you say, no, I feel uncomfortable, take me home, they should say, okay, I'm sorry. But when someone forces themselves on you, this is a serious thing. And I'm pretty sure, was he over 18?
No.
Okay. Well, he was driving. He was old enough to drive, right?
Actually, we walked there.
Okay.
Because he lived close to where I live. So he walked to my house, and then we walked to this place.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
So I was a freshman, and I believe he was a senior.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Did you ever report it?
I did not. Again, my mindset wasn't there. Like I was so incredibly naive for a long time. So those thoughts never even entered.
So with you being older now, and you have all this history, and people are listening to this podcast, what would you tell someone that has been raped like that? What would you tell them to do after this happens? Because most people don't report it. So if someone has been raped, how do they report it? Who do you tell? Who do you talk to? Did you tell anybody?
I did not. So here's the thing. Like, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together initially. Like, I thought that I just had sex. Like, that's what I thought. I remember walking back home and telling my sister, I think I just had sex. Like, that's, like, that's what I thought. I couldn't put it all together. What happened. But now, for anyone who has experienced that, I would absolutely, probably first thing is to tell someone that you trust. Like, tell someone.
Yeah.
Find someone to tell. That would be my first thing. And hopefully, prayerfully, it would be somebody, that and you have a close relationship with. If not, I honestly would go to the authorities. I would.
So in the middle of the process, do you remember saying to him, I don't want to do this?
I do.
And
Absolutely.
he did it anyway.
Exactly.
So that I think that's where we need to teach even our kids that if you're in a predicament or a situation, you know, you have your cell phone right here. You call me. I don't care where you're at. When you say no, and I think as parents, we have to be open now.
Yes.
We have to, if we want our children to talk to us and tell us what they're really going through, we need to keep the lines open to them that says, hey, if you ever get in this situation and you say no and they're forcing themselves on you, call me.
Yes.
Call me right away. Run. Get out. Give them instructions on what to do. Run as fast as you can. And I don't think back then, Dee, there was nobody ever talked to me about it. I never even got the birds and bees conversation.
Exactly. I didn't either.
Everything that happened to me was like rated R. You know, it was like, you know, this is crazy that I had to experience a lot of crazy stuff that traumatized me later on. But you guys, for everyone that's listening out there, I want you to know that no matter what kind of trauma you have been through, our God is powerful. Yes. And what we want to do is equip people. We want to show them how you can use your voice and that your voice is making a difference. You can tell somebody, you can talk to somebody about this. But, you know, when you say no, it means no. And always find, you know, a way out. Be aware of your surroundings. I can't tell you how many times in the New Testament they say, Paul would tell them, hey, I don't want you to be ignorant of these things. This is what Satan is doing, so don't be ignorant of these things. He is seeking whom he may devour. You may think it may not happen to you, but it will. So we have to equip you. And Paul was saying that in the word, I want to equip you with the knowledge so that when it does, or if it does, if these things do happen, you know what to do. And you know how to not give the enemy a foothold in your life. So, but you know, I remember, Dee, just back then there was just not a lot of things spoken about it. You know, not a lot of things said. So what happened after that? This happened. You told someone. You thought was it your sister? You said you thought you had sex.
I did. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then it just kind of died. I remember when I got home. I don't know which order it came in. I don't know if I told her first. No, I immediately went to the bathroom because in our house that we grew up in, we had one bathroom. So I remember going straight to the bathroom and just crying.
Wow.
I do remember, and like staring out of the window, because we had a window in our bathroom because it was facing our backyard. And I literally just kind of stood there, catatonic, crying.
Wow.
And I guess whenever I came out of it, that's when I talked to my sister.
Okay.
Because I remember going to the restroom. And I must have been in there for a while because I remember like my mom or somebody knocking on the door.
Everybody wanting in, yeah.
Exactly. But that was the only place, because I shared a bedroom with my sister.
Yeah.
So that was the only place in the house that I could just have some time to myself, you know? And then I said that to her, and then it just, I didn't talk about it again.
So when you were a child going through puberty, someone crossed a boundary.
Yes.
And betrayed the trust. And then again in the 9th grade, someone crossed the boundary again. Were there any more people that just started crossing boundaries? And did it make it easier for them to cross boundaries with you?
Absolutely. It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a sense then of what a healthy boundary was. And so, because at the same time, my self-worth was going down. I became easy prey for people who meant me absolutely no good whatsoever. And so that's what happened. While I'm thinking, though, I do want to mention one thing, because sometimes it seems like the appropriate response would be to leave or run. But in those moments, sometimes your brain will do something completely different. Yeah. So for me, on every single occasion, I froze. Wow. I didn't have the strength to walk away or run or even fight, for that matter. Yeah. Because I've had people question me, like, did that really happen? Like, why didn't you leave? And it's so hard to explain to someone or try to get them to understand that at that point, God protects you
Yeah.
with your mind,
Yes.
you know, and it just it's almost like you just become completely stiff.
Yeah.
And it's not until it's over that you kind of quote unquote kind of come to,
Right. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if that does happen, I would say reach out to someone after that, because you may not, because I don't want anybody to feel bad or add more trauma to themselves, because now you're beating yourself up because you didn't run, you didn't, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't want you to do that, because I know, like, that's, especially if that's
Did you
how
do that?
I did. I did. Oh my gosh, I did. I did. That's when you start questioning, like, what you wear.
Yeah.
And I went through this whole transition of the things that I wore. And again, that started in childhood, making sure that I'm dressed appropriately. But each time that abuse happened, my appearance and what I wore changed as well.
Really?
So from like once the memories were suppressed in my childhood, then I guess you can say, like, I was just your typical normal student. You know, I remember wearing like fitted jeans and, you know, mini skirts and things like that, you know, in the beginning. But as it continued to happen, my dress changed. So I went from fitted jeans and mini skirts to long skirts, and eventually like oversized clothes, like almost 2 sizes too big at some points, just because I just wanted to cover up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's interesting how you kind of go through, you know, those different changes, and it affects people differently, because some people may cover up,
Right.
and then other people, they don't, you know, they become promiscuous.
Yes.
And really expose themselves.
Yes.
You know? Now, I did lead a promiscuous lifestyle.
Right.
But I didn't dress that way.
Wow.
You know? So it's just, it's so many different dynamics to it. So many different dynamics.
It sounds like
to
you
it.
were struggling with a lot of just guilt and shame, and maybe even self-condemnation, like, well, maybe I deserved it, or because a lot of people do that. They'll say, well, you know, I did go in there, so maybe I just deserve it. But we just want to put peace at your mind that even if you had a mini skirt on, no, you did not deserve this.
Exactly.
This is not your fault. When you say no, no one should ever force themselves on you. Ever. And your no should be no. And I think that it's so important, like we're going to talk about this later on. I don't want to get ahead of myself, about how when we teach people now, and we have classes now, that we openly talk about it, that we set these boundaries, and that my no is no. Because now what happens is, when your boundaries are crossed at that young age, at 10, 11, 12 years old, and then again in the 9th grade, when that boundary is crossed, then you become a yes person. Okay, just say yes to everything, because my no doesn't really matter. Nobody listens to it anyway. And that's the lie of the enemy also. So after that event, did you ever see this person again? Did he apologize? Did he recognize that he did something? Did he want to do it again?
Actually, so it wasn't until years later, like years later, that I came face to face with this person again.
Wow.
And
wow.
I will never forget that moment, because I was at work and he walked through the door.
Oh no.
And his immediate response to me was that of, I can't believe it's you. And before I realized it, like, he came around the counter to give me a hug. And I remember shielding myself.
Wow.
Like, that was my initial response to him. And so we sort of kind of briefly engaged in pleasantries, because it was work related.
Right.
But the minute he turned to walk away from the counter, his countenance completely changed. And I believe that in that moment of him walking away from me, that the Holy Spirit brought back to his remembrance what happened. Because we weren't friends. Like, at a point we were friends, but once that we were no longer friends.
After that, it was
exactly. So it's almost like he totally forgot about that. But I'll never forget the change in his countenance when he turned and walked away from me.
Yeah.
And that day, like when I left work that day, it's only the grace of God that I had the next 3 days off. Because just like I was catatonic standing in front of the window, and I'm literally just putting these two together at my parents' house, I had the exact same response when I got home. Wow. I was actually living with someone at the time, a young lady from the church that I attended. And when I walked in, I remember standing in front of my bed, fully dressed with my uniform on, and crying.
Wow.
And I don't know how long I stood there.
So you had a trigger.
I did. I couldn't get, like, I cried all the way home. And I remember calling someone to pray for me, because I knew I needed it. And so that person prayed I called her the minute I got in the car. And I was working overnight.
Wow.
So I called her, and she prayed for me and made sure I got in the house. And I just remember standing there. And like I said, I don't know how long.
Wow.
Just like God. I don't know how long I stood in front of the window at my parents' house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have no idea.
That's incredible, because mostly, like, when you've been abused and as you're growing up, we often experience these things called triggers, and it can send you in for a tailspin. I mean, it can send you into a pit, and this is what happens when you have those triggers. Now there's this door that is opened up in the spirit realm where the enemy says, hey, you need to get a drink. You need to go do some drugs to get rid of this pain. You need to do this or that. And we're tempted, and you're looking for a door that you can walk through to get relief.
Yes.
Just relief from the pain. And sadly enough, most of them walk through the doors of drug and addictions and things like that. So I remember asking you earlier, I know that, and for you guys that are listening out there, most of the time when a person has been abused, they struggle with boundaries. They usually have some kind of addiction. They struggle with self-worth. They look for their self-worth in their job or in other people, and they need to have words of affirmation from people to build them up. And they'll constantly look into that. And they also will sometimes have trouble with boundaries, because when those boundaries are crossed, you just let people walk all over you, or you become the person. There's two scenarios. Either you become the person that crosses boundaries with other people. You become forceful on people. You may not abuse them like physically, but you can become verbally forceful and force yourself on people, or they will force themselves on you. And there's unhealthy boundaries. So, Dee, as that finished and you're in high school now and you're just getting up and going on with your life, and all this trauma has happened to you, when you felt those triggers and when people would cross boundaries again, what happened during high school, and when did you, like, either you say, I throw the towel in, I'm done, I'm just going to be promiscuous? Did you have struggles? Did you have issues with addictions, or did you look for love in all the wrong places? And when did you find God in this process?
So I remember kind of being to myself after this happened in 9th grade. Not to say that I wasn't interested in guys, but it wasn't necessarily on my radar at that point. And then the guys that I did talk to, they were more like friends. There weren't any boundaries crossed in the beginning. I think that probably happened more towards my junior and senior year in high school. And I had another experience with sexual trauma in my 11th grade year.
Really?
Yes. at that point, I had become like an avid runner, and I was hanging out at the park, and I would spend a lot of time by myself, you know, and there was a park that wasn't too far from my parents' house. So I remember walking to the park one day. I wasn't running or anything. I just went for a walk, and this older guy approached me. I think he was on a bicycle, and he approached me, and he was like, you're really pretty. Like, would you mind if I take some pictures of you? And
wow.
I was like, sure, no problem. He was like, well, if you agree, you know, how about meet me back here, you know, the same time. I don't know if it was the next day or two. I can't remember all of that. But I did. I met him back up there, and we took pictures at the park. And then afterwards, he asked me if he's like, you want to go grab a bite to eat? I don't know where my mind was. That
You're just naive. You're young.
Yeah.
You're not thinking anybody's out to hurt me. Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, sure. I was like, but I've got to go ask. I got to go home first. Like, I got to get permission. You know, I'm in 11th grade. Like, I got to get permission first. And so I've had this conversation with my mother already. And my mother was so diligent about making sure, like, checking who we're going with. Like, she knew all of our friends, and if we left, she knew, you know, the person who we were going with, all of that.
Right.
But this particular day, and he was in his car, so he literally drove me to my house, and I went inside, asked my mom, and for the first time,
Wow.
my mom did not ask. I just said a friend. I'm going to eat with a friend. She didn't ask me who. She didn't come outside to see. So I just turned around and I left. So we go get something to eat, and we actually pick it up. So like a to-go order. And then he was like, well, we're just going to go for a ride. We end up at his house. And just like that, in 9th grade, that abandoned house, this was his home. But to me, it felt just as dirty, you know, like I can remember walking in and it's dark and cold, and like that's what I remember. And he's like, you can have a seat here. So I think I remember like a bar in his house, and like I ate my food barely, because then I'm kind of freaking out a little bit, you know? So I am hungry, but like I'm kind of nibbling at my food, you know? And then we're done, and he asked me, he was like, so you want to dance? So he put some music on, and we start dancing, and the next thing you know, we're on this couch, and from there, just abuse.
Wow.
For the lack of, you know, without going into the details. And I remember his eyes being open.
Wow.
You know, like while he's doing, I remember his eyes being open. And then I ended up back at the house.
Wow.
I can't even tell you that I remember pulling my clothes back up. I remember fixing my clothes, and the next thing I knew, I was at home.
Wow.
So I don't remember if there was conversation in the car or whatever. And so because the park was my thing, I went back to the park, I don't know, a couple days or so later or whatever. And he came up on a bicycle this time and asked me, he was trying to give me the pictures or like, and I was like, I don't want them. He was like, but it's you. And I'm like, I don't want them.
Right.
So to get him off my back, I was like, fine, like I'll take him. And then he left.
And you never saw him again?
I never saw him again.
Wow.
I did see his house again, because his house was in the same neighborhood where my grandmother lived.
Wow.
And I lived with my grandmother for a season, and I was running like around the neighborhood and saw the house, and it stopped me dead in my tracks, because I never thought I would see that house again. And
wow, that's crazy. So in this process, you've had 3 different things that have happened before you're even a senior in high school. All these things happened. Did you tell anybody about him?
I did not. The only time, nope, I didn't say anything.
Not even to your sister?
Not to my sister.
What do you think held you back from saying anything?
Probably because I felt it was my fault. Because I said yes. I said yes to go.
To go.
You know, to go get a bite to eat.
Yeah.
You know?
But when he forced himself on you and you're saying, no, I don't want to do this, that should be enough.
Right.
But it wasn't for him. No. And they go past that. And that's where we draw the line. You know, that's where those boundaries are crossed. Even when you were young and naive and you believed, you know, that he just wanted to eat, you know. And it's just so crazy how we live in this world where there's people out there that will really hurt you.
Exactly.
But you don't want to walk around with the victim mentality either, like everybody's out to get me. Because that's another thing that abusers have. Like, well, everybody's out, the world's bad, I'm bad, everybody's bad, and they're out to get me and they're out to hurt me.
Yes.
So it's like you have a lot of those seeds that were planted in your heart, and now, you know, you have this system, a belief system, and this belief system that you have built is I'm guilty, it was my fault, I'm shameful, and my voice doesn't matter, so why even say anything? And there's a lot of people, Dee, that are right there. So what was your first experience with God? Were you raised in a Christian home, or did they ever talk about things like this in church? Or what? Tell me about your
So
walk
I
there.
grew up Baptist, and we did attend church on a regular basis, but my relationship with the Lord did not happen until, I was an adult when that happened. You know, when you're younger, I remember like going up to the front of the church, you know, when they asked for salvation. But it nothing happened. You know what I mean? Like it was really, it was an act. Not like I was pretending, but there wasn't anything substantial there. It was just me. I guess maybe my spirit sensed something.
Right.
But that was the extent of it.
Wow.
You know, I can't say that I felt God in my heart at that moment, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so no, not at all. And I mean, we attended church, but God wasn't spoken of, you know, in our home.
Right, right.
So I didn't have that to, you know,
to run to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't.
So when was your first encounter with the Lord that you could say, I have encountered him, I felt his love with tears streaming down your face, and you felt that change and that shift on the inside. You felt him, because when you encounter the Lord, you feel it on the inside.
Exactly.
It's not just something that happens on the outside. It is something that happens deep inside of us. When was that?
Exactly. That was actually the night that I feel I truly gave my heart to the Lord. And it was New Year's Eve, 1995. And it was a New Year's Eve service that I attended. And God used the ministry of dance to just win my heart over.
Really? Wow.
It wasn't a sermon, it wasn't an invitation to come. It was through that dance, and it was the lyrics in the song.
Wow.
And I'll never forget it, because it talked about being like in the water, like God just coming in and rescuing you.
Yeah.
Like those were the lyrics, and it was so passionate, and her moves mimicked the words. Like it was like, I'm getting chills. Like it was just so powerful.
That's
and I'm
powerful.
like, that's what I feel. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I feel. So this is 95. But prior to that, I experienced sexual trauma again.
Really?
When I voluntarily, like when I willingly for the first time gave myself to a guy. Just abuse.
Really?
Just, and like demeaning. Like absolutely demeaning. And
did he physically hurt you or verbally? What was the abuse like? And the reason I'm asking that is because there's a lot of women out there that are going through the same thing, but they don't know the difference. They don't know what it's like to be with a man, what's normal.
Right.
What's the normal way of being intimate with a man.
Exactly. So I can tell you, he definitely wanted sex, but wasn't able to, like, he just got frustrated in the process and just left me there in the most demeaning way possible. Just completely just got frustrated and just walked away. So now this is my first time, like, willingly, you know, and you just leave me and you just walk away. Now this same person pretty much became a stalker in my life.
Wow.
From that point on. So he was in and out of my life for about 10 years. And this is the same person who, for me, at the age of 29, raped me.
Wow.
So it's this history
Okay.
of this person kind of being in and out of my life.
Yeah.
You know? So I can tell, like, it really messed with me, you know? And it went from you not being able to get your way in that moment. But eventually he did.
Yeah.
And the difference that I can tell you is, the best way that I can describe it is just rough, degrading.
Yeah. Humiliating.
Very much so.
Wow.
And again, me being naive, not realizing it in the moment. You know, like, I don't know what's taking place. I'm just, again,
right,
following his lead. No boundaries.
Yeah, no
you
boundaries.
know, being in pain and not saying anything, you know, until I turned 29. At that point, my body just couldn't take it anymore.
Wow.
And I'm just like, you have got to, and he wouldn't, like, he absolutely, and I'm saying, like, this hurts, like I am in pain, and he's still trying to, like, he's still forcing himself, you know, like, oh my gosh, it was absolutely horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
Wow.
So that's kind of the journey, you know, of the abuse that I dealt with. So that was, he came into my life in, like, right after I graduated from high school. And the sexual abuse started shortly after that first encounter. So say when we met again, and it just progressed the more that we came in contact with each other.
Wow.
You know, one instance that I can tell, just the things that I basically allowed, you know, this guy to do. Basically, I feel like I just kind of became his rag doll. I mean, I used to describe myself that way at one point, you know, just a rag doll hanging over the edge of a dumpster, because that's how I felt, you know, that men would just use me up. Like, they would literally kind of pull me out the trash, use me up, and then when they were done, just literally just toss me back in, and just kind of pick me up whenever they choose, and you do whatever I want you to do, and then I'm just going to toss you back, adding no kind of value, no nothing to me.
Wow.
Just get what you want, and then you leave.
Wow. Well, first of all, I want to say, Dee, none of those things should have ever happened to you. The enemy had a plan over your life, and he looked for open doors, and he found it. But there came a point in your life, you notice, it's like, okay, I'm not naive anymore. There has been an open door. I'm going to shut this door. And for all you guys that are out there listening, we're going to have Dee back next week to tell us part 2 of her story and her journey of healing. She's going to talk about the abortions that she had and the trauma that came with that. And she's going to talk about her failed marriage. And this is even after giving your heart to the Lord, and talk about how God brought you through that and how you had to overcome all of those things and those emotions, but yet that sexual abuse was still, all of the trauma from that was still laying in your heart. And we're going to talk about all those things that you did, that the Lord allowed those things to surface so he could heal them.
Exactly.
And the reason we want to talk about this, you guys, is because 1 out of every 4 girls is sexually abused before the age of 12, and they never tell people about it. And it's usually by someone. And the reason they don't tell people is because it's from somebody that they trust, that they know, and they figure somehow, this has got to be my fault because this person's amazing. This person is my friend. This person is my uncle, or this person is my dad or my stepfather or someone like that. Someone that you trust and that you look up to. So how, it's hard to tell that. It's hard to tell people, hey, my stepfather is molesting me. He comes in my bedroom in the middle of the night, or my uncle did this, or my brother did this. How do you tell your mom that your brother just did something to you? It's very hard, but we want to encourage you that even if you didn't at 12 years old, the Bible says that you can confess and be healed. And there comes a point in your life where, and things will surface. I promise you, if you can push it down as long as you want, but those triggers are going to start coming, those things will surface, and if you don't deal with it, it will deal with you. So we have to deal with the trauma, and you cannot do it alone, and you can't do it without God. I mean, God is the healer, your creator. But the beautiful thing, Dee, is God has plans for you. Yes. And now I am looking at you, and I'm seeing all that you're doing now. And everything that the enemy planned over your life, God is using that to set other people free. Yes. And you are a living testimony. You can say, hey, I know how you feel. I used to be that girl. I used to be that timid and shy girl. I used to be the one that was naive and insecure and the one that was clothed in guilt and shame. And now I'm going to tell you what God has done for me. Yes. And then you open the doors of freedom for them. And in next week's podcast, you don't want to miss it. And please, I want you guys to share this podcast. We want to get this word out. I want Dee's testimony to go out to the north, the south, and the east and the west. And most of all, if you're listening to this and you've been traumatized by any kind of sexual abuse, and what I mean when people cross the boundaries, when they try to touch you, look at you in the shower, your answer is no, get out of here, don't do that, and they still keep doing it, I want to tell you, your voice is powerful. You are powerful. You are special. You are important, and you need to tell someone. You don't deserve that. And also, I want to say for the guys, the statistics say for guys, 1 out of every 6 boys is sexually abused. And it's usually by another man, by someone that they know, by a brother, by an uncle, by a neighbor, by a brother's friend, someone out there. And I want you to know too, your voice is important. It's powerful. And I want you to know that you can tell somebody, you can talk about it, because the more you talk about it, I mean, don't go out and broadcast it all over the world. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that you can tell someone close to you that you trust. Find a pastor, find a teacher, find a principal, a counselor, someone that you can talk to about the things that you went through so you can work it out and then get those things out of you so that you can now be on your way to healing. So in next week's podcast, we're going to talk about Dee's journey of healing and all these other things that were a product of what you had been through. It was just you were giving birth in the supernatural of things that the enemy wanted you to try to destroy your life. But God. Yes. Somebody say, but God.
But God.
Just say it out loud. But God. Thank you, Lord. Yes. Thank you for God showing up. And thank you for showing up to this podcast. We look forward to seeing you next week. Love you guys. Bye.
Thank you for listening to One Voice Makes a Difference. It is our prayer that through this episode, God has given you a new hope and inspiration to come out of darkness, break the silence, and tell somebody so His light and healing power may begin working in you. If you would like to connect with Janet, visit her website at janetswanson.org. Finally, and most importantly, if you are currently in crisis, please call the 24/7 crisis hotline at 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Don't hesitate. Your voice and your life matters.